Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere a little bit toasty. Imagine stepping into a place so wide, so empty, and so still that even your thoughts sound too loud. This is the Sahara Desert, and spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't last an afternoon out here without a camel, a guide, and about 17 liters of water. And even then, you'd still be crunchy by sunset. We're talking sand that could fry an egg, air that feels like it's been sitting in an oven, and horizons so flat you start wondering if you're stuck inside a giant beige video game map. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the edge of it, the Sahara. It doesn't greet you with a flourish or a grand fanfare. It just exists. An endless expanse of pale gold that glitters under the sun like a sea that forgot how to be water. You feel the heat radiating up from the sand into your sandals, the kind that makes you consider whether your feet are cooking from both sides. The wind brushes across your cheeks, dry as if it's been holding its breath for centuries. Somewhere, far ahead, a faint, irregular movement, a mirage already playing tricks on you before you've even taken your first proper step. The first sound you notice isn't the wind or your own breathing. It's the faint creak of leather straps on a camel's saddle. One of the traders leading the caravan turns and waves lazily, as if to say, "Well, you coming or what?" This is a route older than most cities on the planet, an artery of sand that once connected the beating heart of the Mali Empire to the northern world. Historians still debate exactly how far these postal routes stretched, but there's no question they stitched together cultures like invisible threads across the desert. The ground is deceptive here. Soft dunes give way to hard-packed earth that rattles under your sandals. The sand isn't just one shade of gold. It's a patchwork quilt of pale cream, rust red, and burnt sienna. You catch yourself staring at how the shadows curl around the dune's edge, almost like the folds of a giant sleeping animal. There's no bird song, no rustle of leaves, just the occasional snort of a camel, like a grumpy coworker muttering under his breath. You reach down and let a handful of sand slip through your fingers. It's fine, almost silky, with a faint mineral tang in the air, like someone mixed dust with salt water long ago and let it dry. A trader nearby chuckles, noticing your curiosity. "That sand's been here longer than any of us," he says softly, in a voice weathered by wind. "And it'll be here long after we're gone." The heat presses down, and your mind wanders to a strange historical fact. Some caravans were so vast they could number thousands of camels. Each animal carried goods, gold, ivory, salt, and sometimes, more precious than all of that, letters. Folded, wrapped, and entrusted to couriers who could read the stars like you read street signs. You picture one of those letters, bound in cloth, surviving weeks of sandstorms and thirst, just to deliver a few lines of ink. In a modern world where we panic if a text takes more than 10 seconds to send, it feels absurdly noble. A gust of wind carries a hint of something unexpected, the faint sweetness of dates from a saddlebag ahead. It mixes with the dry scent of dust and old leather, making you briefly hungry even though your mouth is already dry. Your canteen feels heavier in your hand, almost mocking you with its sloshing. The trader with the dates catches your glance and smirks, tossing you one. You bite into it, and the sugary flesh blooms on your tongue like a tiny oasis. You fall into the caravan's slow rhythm. The camels sway in that rolling, hypnotic gait, their padded feet making almost no sound as they press into the sand. The sun begins its slow tilt westward, and the light sharpens, casting long, thin shadows like ink lines drawn across the dunes. For a moment, you imagine the shadows as the script of an ancient letter, written not in ink, but in light and time. Small boy, no older than 10, rides on the back of a camel beside you. His eyes are wide and unblinking, scanning the horizon. He's part of a courier family, born into a life of routes and waypoints. He tells you, almost shyly, that he knows where every well between here and Walata is, and could find them in the Maiwai. Dark if needed. You smile, wondering if at his age you could even find your own socks dot by midday. The heat has thickened into something tangible. It's not just in the air, it's in your bones. The kind of heat that makes your own shadow look tired. Traders drape scarves over their faces, and you follow suit, breathing in air filtered through fabric that smells faintly of dust and sweat. Every so often, a camel groans in a way that makes you think it's narrating its own misery. Off to the right, you spot something that makes you blink twice. A chunk of black rock half buried in the sand. The trader next to you nods. "Meteorite," he says casually, as if pointing out a lost shoe. "They fall here sometimes." Sky sends its stones to the desert. You reach out to touch it. It's cool despite the sun, as if holding a memory of the cold vacuum it came from. You think about how improbable it is. The desert as a mailroom, not just for empires, but for the universe itself. As the afternoon deepens, the color of the sand shifts again, pale gold giving way to amber, then deepening to a burnt orange. The air takes on a coppery taste, and your lips start to crack despite the water you sip. The horizon seems no closer than when you started. It's like walking inside a painting that keeps redrawing itself. Somewhere behind you, a trader begins to hum a slow looping melody that feels older than the dunes. You can't tell if it's a song to pass the time, a prayer, or both. The camels seem to adjust their pace to it, the soft thud of their feet syncing with the rhythm. For a moment, the whole caravan feels like one moving creature, breathing and swaying together. The sun is now a molten disk lowering itself toward the horizon. The shadows stretch until they vanish into the cooling sand. The temperature drops faster than you expect, the air suddenly carrying a crispness that feels almost sharp against your skin. You wrap your scarf a little tighter, watching the last light catch on the dunes like a spark on metal. A courier rides past, his saddlebag bulging with wrapped bundles. You catch sight of one parchment peeking out, its edges worn from the journey. You can't help but wonder what's inside, perhaps news of a king's health, or trade agreements that could shift the balance of power, or maybe just a letter from a brother to a sister, written under the flicker of an oil lamp. Whatever it is, it's being carried with the same care as any treasure. As night approaches, the caravan halts in a shallow hollow between dunes. The camels kneel, their groans rising like a chorus, and traders begin setting up small fires. You lower yourself onto a woven mat, feeling the day's heat radiate up from the sand into your legs. Someone hands you a clay cup of tea, sweet, minty, and hot, because in the desert, oddly enough, hot drinks cool you down. You sip, feeling it spread warmth through your chest as the sky begins to darken. Above, the first stars appear not timidly, but in great, unapologetic bursts. You lean back, listening to the fire crackle and the faint rustle of traders arranging bedrolls. The desert is no longer silent. It's humming softly, in the way that only wide, empty spaces can when they're settling in for the night. You breathe it in, knowing this is only the first step of a long, sand-strewn road. Somewhere in the darkness, a camel snorts like it's laughing at you. You smirk back at it in the dark, feeling the corners of your own mouth soften. Tomorrow will be another day of dunes and heat and wind, but for now, you let your shoulders drop and your eyes grow heavier, the night pressing close around you like a gentle hand. And as you listen to the slow breathing of the caravan, the distant whisper of shifting sand, you sense the path ahead stretching farther than you can see, waiting. The fire from last night has smoldered into a small mound of glowing embers, and the dawn light is slow to arrive, stretching itself lazily over the dunes as though it too has a long day of walking ahead. You wake to the muted thump of camel Feet shifting in the sand, the rustle of woven sacks being rearranged, and the low murmur of voices, not the kind meant for you to hear, but the kind that slip out when people think the desert is keeping their secrets. The cold from the night still clings to your skin, and when you exhale, it's almost visible, like a ghost deciding whether to stay or drift away. Somewhere to your left, two traders are crouched over a leather pouch, their heads nearly touching. You can't quite catch their words, but the cadence is unmistakable short bursts, quick pauses, and the occasional soft laugh that fades quickly, as if swallowed by the sand. There's an intimacy in it, a camaraderie built over miles of shared thirst and dust. They are talking in Songhai, the syllables rising and falling like water over stones. You understand almost none of it, but you don't need to. The tone is enough to tell you this is not about trade rates or camel feed. A little farther away, an older man with a beard like braided silver leans close to a younger courier. He speaks more slowly, his voice deep and steady, with the rhythm of someone who's telling an old story for the 100th time. From the scraps you pick up, it's about Sundiata Keita, the legendary founder of the Mali Empire. He's describing the moment Sundiata first saw the expanse of his new realm, from the Niger River to where the sand swallows the sky. It's the kind of history you half expect to be punctuated by a trumpet flourish, but here it's told over the soft creak of saddles and the hiss of water being poured into a goatskin. The scent of breakfast drifts by, flatbread warming over, a small flame, and something nutty, maybe crushed millet being stirred into a pot. It's a smell that feels heavy and earthy, not glamorous but solid. Someone hands you a piece of bread before you even ask, and it's hot enough to make you juggle it between your fingers for a second before biting in. The crust gives way to soft, chewy warmth, and suddenly you understand why traders guard their cooking fires like treasure. A small fact slips into your mind, uninvited. In some caravans, traders carried trained pigeons as part of their communication system. Not for sending full letters, too slow for that, but for quick alerts, like warning the next stop that a sandstorm was coming. The image of a pigeon stubbornly flapping through a heat shimmer makes you smile into your bread. The camp comes alive in layers. First, the sounds, the camels snorting like they've been woken up too early, and let's be honest, they have. The rhythmic slap of rope against wood as loads are secured. The quiet thud of folded cloth landing on sand. Then, the colors. The pale gold of the first sun on the dunes. The deep indigo of night blankets being rolled away. The faded reds and blues of woven saddle pads that have seen 1,000 miles. You start to notice that not all whispers are friendly. Off to the edge of the camp, two men speak in quick, clipped phrases, their eyes darting toward a third man checking his saddle. You catch only one word clearly: salt. It's enough to tell you this is about cargo, and maybe about whether all of it will reach its destination. Traders can be loyal, but they are also human, and humans have a long history of creative interpretation when it comes to who owns what. Historians still debate how much theft or loss happened along these postal trade routes, but given the occasional sidelong glance you've seen, you wouldn't be shocked if some letters or goods had detoured. The sun pushes a little higher, and the whispers begin to fade into the busier, louder work of breaking camp. A boy walks past humming a tune under his breath, and you realize it's the same melody you heard last night, slowed down to match the calm of morning. He's carrying a bundle of wrapped papers, letters, and he sets them down near the lead camel, as if they were made of spun glass. As you chew the last bite of bread, a woman with a voice like soft gravel tells you that every caravan has a heart. Not a leader, not the fastest camel, but a person whose job is to remember the invisible things. Where the last storm broke, which trader owes a favor to which courier, which well has a stone lip cracked enough to cut a rope. The desert doesn't forgive forgetfulness, she says, not unkindly. The wind picks up slightly, lifting strands of your scarf and carrying snippets of conversation past your ears. Someone is joking about a camel who refuses to drink from anything smaller than a full trough. Another trader, with the weary authority of someone who's tried, mutters, "You can't argue with a camel. They'll just win by standing still." You file that away under desert wisdom alongside. Hot tea cools you down. As the camels are brought into formation, you find yourself walking near two men still murmuring to each other. You catch one phrase, "the road beyond Tichet." It sticks in your mind because last night you heard a different trader say the same place with a certain reverence, like naming a distant temple. You decide not to ask, partly because you don't want to interrupt, and partly because it's nice having the mystery hum in the back of your thoughts. The caravan begins to move, and the whispers become something else entirely. They stretch out, thinning into occasional comments tossed from camel to camel, turning into songs half sung, half mumbled. The rhythm of the walk takes over. You notice how easy it is to fall into step with the sound, the creak, the shuffle, the low grunt, over and over until your mind starts to slip into that strange, floating place where you're not quite thinking and not quite dreaming. The landscape changes almost imperceptibly. The dunes grow taller, their crests sharper. The sand underfoot is finer now, shifting more readily with each step. You feel it creeping into the seams of your clothes, the cuffs of your sleeves, the fold at your neck. It's irritating in the way glitter is persistent and impossible to truly get rid of. Somewhere behind you, a trader sneezes, and another calls out a blessing. By midday, the whispers have become rare again, replaced by the occasional shout of instruction or a barked laugh. The sun is high and white, and the air feels like it's been boiled down to a concentrated glare. A camel in front of you turns its head to look at you, chewing with the kind of slow disdain that could win awards. You almost apologize. Still, every so often, a small pocket of conversation drifts back. A mention of a wedding in Walata. A joke about a trader's snoring being louder than the wind. A quiet remark about how the sand feels different today, lighter, drier, a sign of something coming. You file that away too. The desert talks in its own code, and these people have learned to listen. The day stretches on, but the memory of those morning whispers clings to you like a shadow. They remind you that in a place this vast and empty, human voices, especially the quiet ones, are as precious as water. And somewhere ahead, you suspect, there will be more to overhear. The horizon quivers faintly in the heat, and you keep walking toward it, the sound of soft voices already fading into the desert's deeper hush. You leave Timbuktu in the hour when the sun hasn't yet decided if it wants to be gentle or merciless. The air has that thin coolness that lasts just long enough to make you think, maybe today won't be so bad, which, let's be honest, makes you a gullible optimist. The city slips behind you like a half-remembered dream, mud brick walls still casting long shadows, the faint echo of morning calls, and that smell of charcoal smoke and roasting millet that makes your stomach feel betrayed for walking away from it. Ahead, the caravan's path is already stamped in the sand, a neat sequence of oval depressions, camel after camel pressing its signature into the earth. You step into one, and your boot sinks a little deeper than you expect. There's a tiny, almost comical feeling of the Java people have been doing this exact motion, in this exact place for centuries. You think of Mansa Musa himself leaving on that legendary pilgrimage in 1324. The streets of Cairo later clogged with gold dust because he was just that extra. Historians still debate whether his generosity caused inflation for years afterward, or if that's an exaggerated traveler's tale, but either way, it makes your own pockets feel even more embarrassingly light. The camels sway ahead of you like metronomes on tranquilizers, their long shadows leaning east. Somewhere to your left, a man in indigo wrap starts humming a slow Songhai ballad, and others join in without looking at each other. The tune has that hypnotic, slightly mournful rhythm that could carry you through a week of walking without ever needing a verse change. You catch a lyric about a road carved from the moon's silver and file it away, not because you think it's literal, But because in the desert, you're starting to suspect metaphors have more staying power than maps, the light shifts, and the sand underfoot changes from pale gold to something richer, almost red. One of the caravan elders notices your glance and mutters, "Tanazruft," begins to whisper. You've heard the name before, the land of thirst. Not exactly a motivational poster quote. The strange thing? He's smiling when he says it. You! Imagine a gym membership that advertises, "Come for the dehydration, stay for the hallucinations, and shiver despite the climbing heat." By mid-morning, Timbuktu is a smudge on the southern horizon, and the north ahead is all glare and shimmer. A younger trader falls into step with you, offering a strip of dried camel meat. It's saltier than you expect, and suddenly you understand why salt was once worth its weight in gold here. People talk about the Mali Empire's gold reserves, but fewer mention that in the desert, salt could keep you alive longer than a crown jewel. He tells you a quiet fact: some caravans carried nothing but salt for weeks, stacked in slabs taller than a man, destined for markets where a pinch in a stew was worth a handshake and a promise. You chew slowly, tasting 1,000 traded miles. In every fiber dot, the heat sharpens. Shadows vanish under the camels like they've been erased. Even the jokes fade into silence, replaced by the rhythmic thud of padded feet and the faint hiss of wind pushing loose grains across your path. Every so often, a gust lifts just enough sand to make you pull your scarf tighter, and for a moment, the world is reduced to cloth against your face and the warm, mineral tang of dust in your mouth. You start noticing signs of an older road, half buried. Shards of pottery, a rusted stirrup ring, the bleached vertebra of something that might once have been a goat, or might have been here longer than goats. The elder with the smile notices your curiosity and says, "The desert keeps what it wants, but sometimes it shares." His voice is dry as the air, but there's a kind of respect in it, as if he's talking about a person, not a place. Around noon, you pause at a low ridge where the sand swirls differently, forming tiny crescents that point the wrong way. The heart of the caravan, a wiry woman with eyes like chips of obsidian, points at them and says, "Wind changed." She doesn't elaborate, and no one asks. You wonder if that's the same unspoken understanding that's kept caravans alive for 1,000 years. Some knowledge is like water spill. It too freely, and it evaporates. As the sun climbs higher, the air takes on that strange, silent density, as if sound itself is wilting. You find yourself focusing on micro details, the pattern of cracks in your water gourd, the exact way your shadow flickers when the sand is softer, the way the horizon seems to rise and fall in slow, impossible waves. In the absence of chatter, your thoughts start to drift. What messages have been carried on this road? Letters from one ruler to another, written in flowing Arabic script? Secret orders sealed in wax? Or maybe just a hurried note to a cousin, saying, "Still alive. Tell mother I miss her stew." By late afternoon, your legs ache in that deep, satisfying way that says you've earned your exhaustion. The sun starts leaning west, painting everything in a wash of amber that makes the camels look carved from old honey. The young trader from earlier tells you a story about an ancestor who set out on this route with 20 camels and returned with one. But that one carried manuscripts that would later rest in Timbuktu's fabled libraries. Historians still debate how many manuscripts survived the centuries, but even the lowest estimates make you realize that the desert was not just a highway for gold and salt, but for words. Somewhere behind you, a burst of laughter rolls down the line, breaking the day's quiet like a dropped jug. You turn to see two boys chasing a startled goat that's somehow gotten loose from its tether. The goat is faster, smarter, and almost certainly more hydrated than either of them. It's the first time you've smiled wide all day. The evening cool creeps in faster than you expect. By the time the caravan stops, the sand feels cold under your palms when you sit. Fires spark again, the air carrying the scent of cumin and dried apricot. You eat slowly, watching the last light fade until the horizon swallows it whole. Somewhere, in the dark, a voice starts another song, not mournful this time, but bright, teasing, the kind of tune you hum without realizing. You lie back, the stars blooming overhead like they've been waiting all day for your eyes. The road north lies ahead, stamped with the day's footsteps, but it already feels like more than just distance. You can't help wondering what those first real challenges will look like when the desert decides to stop being merely patient. Tomorrow, the path will bend toward the old wells, if they're still there. The sun has climbed to a place that feels, frankly, unreasonable. It's the kind of heat that makes you question your life choices, like maybe a desk job in a windowless basement wouldn't have been so bad. Every breath you take feels toasted before it even reaches your lungs. The air shimmers in lazy waves like the world's biggest stovetop. And somewhere ahead, the horizon starts, doing that magic trick where it looks like someone poured silver water all over it. You know, it's a mirage. Your brain knows it's a mirage, but your throat is fully ready to believe. It would be so easy to kick your heels, urge the camel forward, and just once try to reach that perfect line of green palms. Except the palms bend and twist as you watch, their leaves flickering into something else entirely, a crooked well. And a boy crouched beside it with sunburned cheeks and a wicked grin. He's dropping a block of salt into the water, and the faint fizz it makes is almost drinkable. The sound reminds you of opening a soda back home, except nobody in this century is going to hand you ice cubes. The man riding a little ahead turns his head, squinting at you through the heat haze. Mirages, he says, voice lazy but amused, are the desert's way of checking if you're paying attention. Or if you're gullible, you ask. Same thing, he says, and rides on. The heat squeezes you tighter. Even the camels seem to be moving slower, each step a creak of leather and a low, wet sigh through their noses. A warm, dusty smell drifts back from the spice pouch tied to the saddle in front of you, coriander, maybe, or fenugreek, with a faint bitterness that makes you think of dark coffee left too long on the burner. Somewhere behind, someone clicks, their tongue in time with their mount steps, the sound sharp against the whisper of wind-blown grains. You glance sideways and catch the younger merchant grinning. Ever heard the story about Mansa Musa's elephants? He asks. I've heard about his gold, you say. Oh, sure. But there's an old tale he marched elephants across this desert, each one carrying trunks full of treasure. Some say it's true. Others, he shrugs. Historians still argue about whether anyone could keep elephants alive out here. He lets the pause stretch, then adds, but people also still argue whether cats can swim, so who knows? A ripple of laughter works its way down the caravan, brief but warm. It reminds you of a tiny detail from a night or two ago, the way sound carries here, rolling across sand like it's bouncing off invisible walls. The mirage shifts again. You see Timbuktu, not the sleepy version you left behind yesterday, but bright and bustling. Scribes under shade canopies, women spreading millet on round trays, the scent of ink curling in the air like thin smoke. A man in a blue robe gestures, with a quill, explaining the worth of a certain manuscript to a buyer who's pretending not to care. Then the vision folds in on itself and vanishes, as if some invisible hand has flipped to another channel. Your camel snorts and shakes its head, jolting you back to the present. The saddle creaks. The sand underfoot crunches in that oddly crisp way it does when it's bone dry. And even without looking, you know the baggage hanging from every side of this caravan isn't just water skins or bundles of cloth. It's the invisible cargo of stories, memories, and boasts from everyone who's walked this way before. A breeze rolls past. It's hotter than most oven settings, yet carries a faint tang of salt. That means Tagaza's not far. The place where walls are built of salt blocks, so solid you could lean on them until someone gets hungry and decides to shave off a piece for dinner. The younger merchant pipes up again. You know, salt from here used to be traded ounce for ounce with gold in Gao. That can't be right. Absolutely true. Out here, gold's a nice to have. Salt is survival. You can't eat gold. You chuckle. Depends on the recipe. The heat deepens, pushing the shadows long and thin, like the camels are dragging giant black ribbons behind them. Each step feels like a slow heartbeat. Somewhere to the right, a gust picks up and carves little ridges into the dune, making it look like a topographic map you might have crammed for in school only. No one back then mentioned the map could sting your face. Your thoughts drift. You imagine the traders of centuries past seeing the same mirages, telling the same half-true stories to keep the boredom away, feeling the same mix of awe and irritation at the desert's endless repetition. You wonder if those old caravans had their own versions of your group's running jokes, like the man everyone swears snores louder than a sandstorm, or the camel that smiles whenever someone drops food. By the time the sun begins its slow tilt toward the west, the horizon has gone molten again. You decide not to bother deciding whether the shimmer ahead is real. It might be an oasis, it might be another borrowed memory, it might just be the light playing one of its long, slow pranks. Either way, you keep writing. Somewhere in the blur ahead, the day's story is still unrolling, line by line, and beyond that, where the haze and the sand meet, something waits. The first sign of the well isn't the stone rim or the shade of an acacia, but the sound-soft hollow, a faint slosh that cuts through the hush like someone dropping a coin into a faraway jar. You hear it before you see it, and suddenly, the whole caravan seems to lean toward it, camels stretching their necks as if their bones could sniff water. The air smells different here, still dry, but layered with the faint, mineral tang of something that hasn't seen daylight in centuries. The sand under your feet changes too, coarser, dotted with flecks of dark stone like spilled pepper. An elder clicks his tongue at a restless camel and mutters, "Titch, it's been here longer than your grandfather's grandfather." His voice has that reverent edge usually reserved for saints, or maybe for the first sip of tea after fasting all day. You step closer and catch sight of the stonework weathered blocks stacked in a perfect ring, worn smooth where countless ropes have rubbed over centuries. A trader next to you whispers, "You know, Mansa Musa stopped here once." Whole caravan, gold and all, must have looked like the sun had come to drink. The story feels too grand to picture, but then again, so does the fact that people used to line up here for days during droughts. Someone drops a bucket down and the rope creaks, unwinding into the dark. The splash comes late, delayed by the depth, and the cool draft that rises up is so clean it almost smells sweet. You're hit with a wave of thirst you didn't know you had, like walking past a bakery and suddenly realizing you could demolish 6 pastries without blinking. A young man from the back calls out, "Bet it's just mirage juice." Earning a chorus of groans. But when the first cup is passed, tin cool against your fingers, the taste is so clear and cold you want to laugh. It's not just water, it's a reminder that the desert hasn't entirely decided to kill you yet. The air around the well turns into a marketplace without walls. Spices change hands, cloth samples flicker in the sun, and dates pass from palm to palm like currency. A wiry woman in indigo leans toward you and murmurs, "Once, this was busier than any port in the empire. Salt caravans, copper traders, even messengers from the Ghana kings." She smiles like she's giving away a secret. You notice a carved symbol on one of the stones, 2 crescents facing each other. When you point it out, an old man shrugs. Some say it's the mark of the first builders. Others say it's just bored teenagers from 200 years ago. He chuckles. Historians still argue about it. The sun sharpens the shadows until the well's rim looks like an ink circle on a parchment map. Somewhere behind you, a boy tries to mimic a camel's groan and gets swatted playfully by a driver. 2 men argue about whether the water here has healing powers, or if that's just a story to keep travelers from drinking it all in one go. You half listen, caught in the way the rope frays at the edges, each fiber telling its own little story of weredot as the camels kneel in the sand. You catch whiffs of cumin, leather, and whetstone, a combination that shouldn't work, but somehow does, like mint in hot chocolate. A thin breeze slides across your neck, carrying the low hum of voices in Songhai, Hassaniya Arabic, and something you can't place, each word shaped differently, yet all orbiting around this one, shared thirst. Trader with a crooked smile offers you a pouch of salt. Straight from Tagaza, he says, patting it like a pet. Worth more than gold, in the right year. You laugh, thinking he's joking, but he isn't. The weight in your palm is heavier than it looks, the grains catching the light like tiny shards of glass. Nearby, a group of women exchange embroidered cloth for a small leather satchel inside. You glimpse what looks like dried fish. The smell is sharp, unexpected, and somehow comforting. Brought up the river, before the crossing, one of them explains. Little taste of home. You sit for a moment, feeling the cool seep from the stone rim into your legs. The sound of the bucket dropping again is hypnotic, like the tick of a clock you didn't know was there. Someone starts a slow song, the kind that rolls low and easy, wrapping around the well's hollow echo, until it feels like the stones themselves are singing back. A boy sidles up to you, holding a carved wooden camel. 2 copper coins, he says, dead serious. You counter with one. He grins and shakes his head. You'll regret it when the sand spirits come. It's a terrible sales pitch, but you buy it anyway. The heat presses back in as the caravan readies to move. But it's softer now, like the sun knows it can't compete with what's in your skin. This little reservoir of cool, ancient water. You take one last look at the well, at the shadows stretching like compass points, at the people who will pass this place tomorrow, next year, in 50 years, each leaving their own breath behind. And as you follow the camels back onto the path, you catch the faint glint of something far ahead, another story waiting to happen. The sun has melted into the horizon, leaving the sky in a slow motion fade from copper to violet, then finally into a blue so deep it feels like you could fall into it. The caravan has made camp in a hollow between dunes, the sand here finer and cooler, carrying a faint mineral scent like dry stone after rain. You're still carrying the coolness of Tichit's water inside you, but it's fading fast as the air begins to nip at your cheeks. The first thing you notice is how loud the silence is. It's the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own blinking. Then a camel sighs somewhere behind you, the sound halfway between a disgruntled trombone and someone remembering they left the oven on. You're handed a long rectangle of woven palm fiber that looks like it was designed by someone who's never slept outside in their life. It creaks as you unroll it, sand crunching beneath like tiny broken seashells. The ground is still holding onto the day's heat, and lying down feels like curling up on a sun-baked car hood. Not far away, a pot boils over a low fire. The air carries the scent of mint and sharp black tea, cut through with the warm, dusty smell of wood smoke. A man in a deep blue turban ladles tea into small glasses, pouring from a height so the liquid froths like the head on a pint of beer. Only this one's hot enough to scald your soul. You're given one, and the first sip burns your tongue in a way that's almost addictive. Someone across the fire says, "Cold tonight." Another voice answers, "Better than sweating." A pause, then, "Maybe for you." The small circle laughs, the sound mixing with the soft pop of sap in the fire. Overhead, the stars start switching on, not all at once, but in slow, deliberate groups, as if the sky is pacing itself. They're so bright they throw faint shadows, something you'd swear was impossible until you see your own hand's outline on the sand. You try to count them, lose track, and give up. Around 30. Modern math was never designed for this. The wind shifts, brushing your cheek like someone testing if you're awake. It carries smells from far away, faintly sweet blossoms, the dry musk of camel hair, and the ghost of rain that hasn't happened yet. You mention it, and the man beside you smiles. It's the Sahel storms, he says. The wind brings their scent before they arrive, sometimes days before. You're tempted to call that impossible, but you've learned the desert doesn't care about what you think is possible. A young boy sidles up, the same one who sold you the carved wooden camel earlier. Want to hear the sand breathe? He asks. Curiosity wins. You follow him a few paces beyond the fire's reach, into the darkness where the night's cool is sharper dot at first. You hear nothing but the dull roar in your ears from the day's heat. Then, faint but real, comes a low rhythmic hum like a seashell's whisper, but heavier. The boy grins. Old sea under the sand, he says. You remember reading once that parts of the Sahara were once seabeds, littered with shells the size of your palm. Historians still debate how quickly it dried, you tell him. He shrugs like it doesn't matter because to him, the desert isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's just where life happens. Walking back, the sand feels softer, looser, as if you're stepping on the ghost of waves. The fire's glow reaches out like a beacon, turning the dunes into gentle walls. Traders have begun telling stories. One older man's voice carries above the rest, describing the great pilgrimage of Mansa Musa, the king so wealthy that his journey to Mecca scattered gold through cities until it warped entire economies. You've heard the headline version before, but this man adds the detail that Musa traveled with architects and scholars, intending to remake his empire on his return. Whether those plans ever took shape is another story, and one the desert seems unwilling to answer. A camel bell jingles softly, the animal shifting in the dark. Somewhere beyond the fire, a goat coughs in a way that's too close to a human clearing their throat. A pot lid rattles as someone adds more tea leaves, the scent blooming richer, layered now with sugar. Lying back, you watch the sky deepen, the Milky Way sharpening into a river of light. It's almost too much like high-definition nature TV. Except no buffering. The cold begins to creep in under your scarf, nibbling at the tip of your nose. You tuck yourself tighter, listening to the fire settle into coals. A trader leans over to you and says quietly, "See that bright one there?" He points to a star low in the east. When it rises, we know morning isn't far. If it's cloudy, we wake by the camel's restlessness instead. You file that away, though you're pretty sure you'd oversleep both. Another meteor burns across the sky, trailing a white line that fades almost instantly. A woman nearby murmurs something in a language you don't know, her voice almost blending into the wind. You don't ask what it means, you'd rather leave it as a mystery. The last thing you register before sleep is the desert's breathing hum returning, wrapping around you like a slow tide. It carries you down into dreams of water over sand, of ships that sailed where now only dunes stand. And when you wake, the air is still, the coals are dust, and on the horizon there's a new glint, small, sharp, and promising. Whatever it is, you know you'll be walking toward it. The morning light doesn't so much arrive as spilling over the dunes in a slow golden pour that makes everything look like it's been dipped in warm honey. You're still half wrapped in your scarf, blinking at the horizon where that bright speck from last night is now a clear glint, sitting low but unblinking. The camp is shifted into quiet motion, ropes being loosened, mats rolled, the faint clink of cooking pots that sound suspiciously like they've been dented since yesterday. You stretch and the desert air hits you cool, dry, and with that faint mineral tang that always makes you think of stone cellars. Somewhere behind you, a camel lets out a morning groan, a sound that could easily be mistaken for a teenager being asked to take the trash out. The glint grows sharper as you walk. By the time you're close enough to see its shape, the heat has started creeping up your back like a lazy cat. The light is bouncing off something pale, slabs stacked in neat, uneven towers, like giant bookshelves missing the books. They aren't stone. They're salt, And not the sprinkle on your fries kind. Either. These blocks are the size of small suitcases. Their edges crusted with dust and tiny glittering crystals. You run a finger along one. It leaves your skin tasting like you've licked the rim of a margarita glass. The first voice you hear is brisk, businesslike. 4 blocks for 1 measure, a man says in a tone that suggests he's said this 100 times today, even though it's still morning. His robes are patched, but clean, the deep indigo bleached pale in places from years under the sun. Across from him, another man shakes his head. His turban so white, it's practically its own light source. 2 blocks and you carry, the second man counters. 4 blocks and you carry. They both grin, which probably means they're enjoying the dance more than the deal. The air smells faintly briny, like the memory of a sea breeze. It's strange, tasting ocean in a place where the nearest wave is hundreds of miles away. The traders work in a rhythm, lifting, stacking, weighing with practiced palms. There's no shouting, no haggling chaos, just a steady hum of voices, the scrape of wood sledges, the dull thud of salt on camel panniers. You've read about this exchange before, the trans-Saharan salt for gold trade that built empires. Gold from the forests of the south, traded for salt mined from the desert's bones. It's one of history's great economy-defining swaps, like the Silk Road, but crunchier. What you didn't know. In some eras, salt here was worth more than gold. By weight. People have crossed this desert for weeks under the kind of sun that could cook bread, just to haul home blocks of it. An older woman notices you staring and waves you over. She's slicing thin slivers from a salt block with a knife that looks older than both of you combined. She pots one into a steaming pot balanced over a small fire. The smell is instantly mouth-watering, spicy, rich, and so unlike the dry air that you lean forward without thinking. Tea? She asks. You nod, and she hands you a cup so small it feels like you're playing Tea Party. The liquid is almost syrupy, so sweet it makes your teeth ache, but the salt cuts through, leaving you wanting another sip before you've swallowed the first. Nearby, a boy about 12 is sketching something in the sand with a stick. You crouch down to see it, a camel caravan, neatly drawn, each hump perfectly round like he's tracing pebbles. That's you, he says, pointing to one tiny figure. Do I really look like that? You ask. He nods solemnly. Smaller. The heat starts to rise, the light bouncing off the salt so fiercely you squint even with your scarf pulled low. It's the kind of brightness that makes you feel like your retinas have been personally insulted. The salt cutters wear head wraps pulled tight across their noses, eyes narrowed to slits. Every scrape of blade on crystal echoes in the still air. Crisp as a snapped icicle. You're told that these slabs came from Tandeni, hundreds of miles north. The miners work in pits so hot that the tools burn to the touch if left in the sun too long. Historians still debate whether the work was done mostly by free labor or enslaved men. Your guide says, her voice dropping slightly. She glances at the nearest cutters, then back at you. Doesn't change what it takes to bring it here. By midday, the small settlement has swelled with movement, new camels arriving, old ones leaving, ropes creaking as loads are shifted. Someone is singing, low and rhythmic, the kind of melody that works with the heat instead of against it. The scent of fried millet cakes drifts by, carried on a rare breeze that feels like opening an oven door hot but promising food. One trader beckons you closer and pulls out something wrapped in cloth. Inside, flecks of gold, fine as sand. They catch the light in a way that makes you forget to blink. From the river, he says, soft gold, for salt. His tone makes it sound obvious, inevitable. The trade feels less like barter and more like gravity. You notice the odd mix of goods around you. Leather water bags dark with use, beads and colors that look like they came from far-off coasts. A single brass astrolabe that's dented, but clearly loved. There's a sense that every object here has crossed more landscapes than you have. A man leans in, lowers his voice. Once, this place saw caravans longer than the horizon. Now, he gestures at the modest circle of camels. We carry enough for what's needed. No more. Times change. There's no sadness in it, just fact. The same way you might mention a river changing course. The afternoon heat presses down, flattening sound until even the camels chew more slowly. The salt stacks throw short, hard shadows, the ground glittering in patches like someone spilled sugar. You sip more tea, feeling the grains crunch faintly against your teeth, and decide it's the most desert-accurate drink possible. By late light, deals are sealed, ropes tightened, and the air cools just enough to make you realize how much you've been sweating. The settlement seems to fold in on itself, fires doused, mats rolled, tracks already half swallowed by the sand. The last thing you see before turning away is a man loading the final salt block onto a camel's back, patting it once like you'd pat a loyal dog. The horizon ahead is bare except for a faint smudge, low, dark, and unmoving. It could be another settlement, a stand of trees, or just a trick of the light. Either way, your feet point toward it. You notice at first as a trick of the light, how one ridge of sand, taller than the others, throws a shadow so deep it seems to drink the afternoon whole. The air here is still, like it's waiting for you to make the next move. Heat ripples blur the horizon into liquid, but this shade feels older than weather, like something carved into the memory of the land. Even the camels slow, their necks swaying in a rhythm more cautious than tired. Somewhere a flap of cloth snaps sharply in the wind, then falls silent. When you step into the edge of the shadow, the temperature drops fast enough to make you gasp. You can smell the faint coolness like stone after rain, though there hasn't been rain here for months. Sand grits softly under your sandals, the grains colder, heavier. A trader walking beside you glances up at the dune's crest and says, "They say this one doesn't move." His voice is low, not out of fear, but in that tone people use when talking about relatives who might overhear. You squint at the slope, expecting it to shift like any other dune, but the lines stay sharp. How's that possible? You ask. Maybe it's full of stone, he says, or maybe something else. And he doesn't elaborate, which is both unhelpful and deeply effective. In the silence, the only sound is the creak of camel leather and the distant whistle of wind. Threading through a narrow gap somewhere beyond, a smell drifts in, dry herbs, crushed underfoot somewhere. It reminds you of time, but more bitter, like the air itself is seasoning you. As you move deeper into the shadow, you catch sight of something half buried in the slope, a line of carved blocks, their edges worn to almost organic curves. You run your fingers over one. It's warm on top but cool underneath, as if it's been hiding its own weather. A boy from the caravan runs up and says, "Don't touch too long, spirits might think you're saying hello." He grins, but there's a flicker in his eyes that says maybe it's not all a joke. Historical accounts come to mind, the way caravans once used certain dunes as landmarks, fixed points in a sea that shifted every season. You think of the Battle of Kyrene in 1235, when Sundiata Keita rose to power and began shaping the Mali Empire. Some traders claim this dune stood here even then, marking a route older than empires. Historians still debate whether such immovable dunes are natural formations or the remains of forgotten structures. The air here carries sound differently. Voices feel closer, even if they come from the back of the caravan. A merchant calls out, "Salt weighs more than gold here," and laughs at his own joke. Though it's partly true, your legs ache more from salt than coins could ever manage. Another man offers you a handful of dates, sticky and sun-warmed. You bite into one, and the sweetness explodes like you've just cheated desert physics. A gust of wind suddenly rakes over the crest, scattering a fine spray of sand that patters against your scarf like dry rain. It smells faintly metallic, iron in the soil maybe. The trader beside you mutters, "That's the dune breathing," and you're halfway sure he's not kidding. You pause to drink from your water skin. the liquid tasting faintly of leather. And yesterday's sun. From somewhere up ahead, the sound of scraping grows louder, men clearing a narrow pass between this dune and its smaller neighbor. The passage is just wide enough for a camel to squeeze through, and stepping inside feels like ducking into a cathedral nave made of sand. The temperature drops another notch, and you hear your own footsteps echo, which is scientifically questionable, but happening anyway. One of the older men tells you, long ago, salt was carried through here on the way to Gao, sometimes gold. Came back the same way, but not always. Some say more was lost than made it home. His eyes track a vulture circling overhead, just visible against the narrow strip of sky dot. By the time you emerge on the other side, the light has softened to ember. The shadow stretches even farther now, pointing toward something low and dark. On the horizon, the caravan pauses to realign packs, the air buzzing faintly with the sound of flies drawn to camel sweat. You catch yourself wondering, not for the first time, if this place marks the halfway point between something you can name and something you can't. The wind picks up, tugging at the tassels on your scarf, and somewhere ahead a child shouts that he's seen the walls. No one corrects him. You follow their gaze, and in the far distance, shapes shimmer in the heat like the first pieces of an answered question. The smudge on the horizon hardens into something more certain, a low line of walls, sun-faded but still carrying that air of not yet forgotten importance. The air changes first, losing some of its dry rasp and gaining a cool note like the smell that slips out of a cracked cellar door. The camels seem to sense it too. Their steps become brisker, the way you might walk faster when you realize the cafe is still open, and there might be pastries left. Your scarf is flecked with the last gold dust of the dune's shadow when the first palm fronds appear, waving just enough to convince you the breeze is real. The sound of water, honest to goodness water, threads into the air, faint at first, then undeniable. You've been staring at sand so long that seeing green feels almost suspicious, like you've accidentally wandered into a different movie. Genre. A man walking beside you grins. "Asuk," he says, with that tone people reserve for places that have a personality, not just a name. "Is it as good as it looks?" you ask. He chuckles. "Better, unless you're the type who hates shade and fresh bread." The closer you get, the more the scents multiply. Freshly baked flatbread, date syrup bubbling somewhere, wood smoke that's more comfort than hazard. Your mouth actually waters, which feels like a betrayal after all the desert discipline you've been practicing. The walls are patched with layers of stone, some pale as bone, others dark as coffee grounds. In places, the mortar has worn away so much you can fit a whole hand in the gaps. Stepping through the gate is like slipping into a different climate zone. The air is instantly cooler, textured with the trickle of a narrow stream that threads between palms. Shadows ripple across your face, not from clouds. There are none but from fronds swaying overhead. The ground is a patchwork of sand, flat stone, and the occasional stubborn patch of grass. Somewhere a woman laughs, and it's the first laughter you've heard that wasn't wrapped in the dryness of survival. You pass a cluster of market stalls, where merchants lean on counters stacked with dates so glossy they reflect the sunlight, like polished leather shoes. There are bundles of dried herbs, copper pots dented from honest use, and baskets of figs that smell like the distilled essence of late summer. A boy is selling slices of melon kept cool in the stream. The juice runs down your chin and makes you remember what unhurried sweetness tastes like. Historical weight sits under all this life. You recall that Esuk, once known as Tadmeka, was a major trading hub in the Mali Empire, a stop for caravans carrying gold, salt, and ideas between the Sahara and the Mediterranean. It was also a center for Islamic scholarship, with travelers from as far as Cairo and Cordoba resting here. One unusual fact: some old records suggest that Esuk minted its own silver coins, stamped with designs that no one has fully deciphered. Historians still debate whether these coins were purely local currency or part of a broader trade network stretching across the desert. You duck under a low awning to escape the mid-afternoon glare and find yourself staring at a table covered in jewelry-thin gold rings, beadwork in colors that seem impossibly vivid against the earth tones of the street. The woman behind the table looks up, eyes sharp. "You buy or just looking?" "Mostly just looking," you say. "Looking costs one story," she replies, deadpan. You tell her about the unmoving dune, and she nods slowly. "Some things are meant to be where they are," she says. "Like stones and some people." Then she waves you on before you can ask if she means you. The stream widens into a shallow pool where children are splashing, their shrieks echoing off the walls. A group of older men sit nearby under a tamarind tree, playing a game with stones and a carved wooden board. One of them gestures for you to join, but you decline gently, knowing you'd lose faster than a smartphone battery in the Sahara. The scent of mint drifts past from somewhere behind you, layered over with the tang of goat cheese being sliced onto flatbread. A little further on, you come to the heart of the oasis, a courtyard with a covered well. The rope creaks as a bucket comes up, dripping and dark, and the smell is sharp and mineral-rich. You cup your hands, letting the water pool before sipping. It's colder than you expect, and sweeter too, though you're aware that's partly the relief talking. The late daylight begins to soften, brushing the stone walls with copper. A muezzin's call threads into the air, not loud but insistent, folding over the murmur of the market and the soft plash of the stream. You find yourself slowing your steps, drawn into the rhythm of a place that has measured its days in trade, prayer, and water for centuries. By the time you circle back toward the gate, the shadows have deepened and torches begin to flicker against the walls. A merchant you passed earlier waves you over, pressing a paper-wrapped parcel into your handbread, still warm from the oven. "For the road," he says simply. Outside the walls, the desert waits, patient and unblinking. The caravan is already gathering, the camel silhouettes tall against the last streaks of gold in the sky. You glance back once at the green heart of Azuk, then forward, where a darker shape on the horizon hints at stone that is not an oasis, but something built to last in a very different way. The silhouette ahead refuses to sharpen quickly. It just sits there on the horizon like a riddle with no deadline. The caravan stretches out in front of you, the camel's steps making that deep, padded thump that sounds like someone drumming on an overstuffed sofa. Every so often, a gust of wind brushes past, lifting a curl of sand that rasps against your cheeks like fine grit sandpaper. The last warmth from the bread in your bag has faded, but the scent lingers, a quiet comfort in the cooling air. You're walking close enough to overhear two men talking about the riders, in a tone that makes it sound like they aren't just talking about horsemen, but something a little faster, a little more precise. You wait for a lull in the conversation and ask, "What riders?" "Couriers," one says, "the ones who make the road run even when the rest of us are still tying up our camel bags. Think of them as text messages," the other adds, grinning. "Only the roaming charges are paid in muscle and horse sweat. The desert under your feet is different now, more packed, streaked with faint grooves. Not the heavy furrows of wagon wheels, but finer tracks, the kind left by hooves moving at speed. There's a tautness in the air, like you're standing on a stage just before the first actor appears. Somewhere to your left, a small herd of goats clambers over a rise, their bells tinkling in a rhythm that seems too delicate for this vastness. In the distance, a low cloud of dust appears, moving against the wind. You don't need anyone to tell you what that means. The riders come into view in a blur of lean horses in dark tunics, their saddlebags tied tight, their eyes fixed on something miles ahead. One of them calls out a sharp, high note, and the caravan parts just enough to let them through without breaking stride. You catch a flash of steel at a belt, and then they're gone, swallowed by the horizon like someone hitting skip intro on a long episode. The man beside you says, they're part of a relay station set every day's ride apart. In the high days of the Mali Empire, the royal road between Niani and the northern trade cities was kept alive by these mounted couriers, carrying not just news of trade, but orders from the Mansa himself. You remember the famous pilgrimage of Mansa Musa in 1324, when his gold-laden journey to Mecca made headlines across the known world, or would have if newspapers existed. Couriers like these would have been the veins and arteries of that vast sandy body. One lesser-known fact, he says, is that some stations had trained pigeons to back up messengers in case the horses couldn't get through. Historians still debate whether this was a widespread practice or just a few ambitious outposts trying to impress their neighbors. The sun edges lower, flattening the light until every dune looks like it's been drawn with a single bold stroke. You hear the faint rattle of metal as a courier's stirrup clips against his boot. The smell of their horses drifts back, a mix of leather, sweat, and that faint, sweet tang of dry grass. Later, as the caravan pauses to adjust loads, a young man with a rolled-up parchment slung across his back drops down beside you. Ever ride? He asks. Not like that, you admit. He smirks. Fastest I've done is from here to Tagaza in 3 days. You raise your eyebrows. And you didn't fall off? Only once, he says, as if that's perfectly normal. The camp that night is quieter than a souk, the only light coming from a small cluster of oil lamps. Somewhere someone is humming a slow, lilting melody that matches the sway of the camels when they're resting. You wrap yourself in your scarf and watch a courier cleaning his saddle with the care some people reserve for polishing trophies. He works in silence, except for the soft squeak of leather under cloth. When the wind picks up, it carries with it the faintest sound hoofbeats in the distance, approaching, then fading again. Maybe another rider on another mission, or maybe just an echo from the past, bleeding into the night air. Either way, you can't shake the feeling that the desert keeps its own inbox, and these tracks are its unread messages. By the time you lie down, the horizon ahead is a deeper shade of black than the sky above it, and in that darkness, a line of pale stone waits for morning to reveal its true shape. The horizon's pale stone slowly reshapes under the morning sun, but before the caravan gets there, the day insists on a pause. Not because anyone voted for it. No one here has the kind of authority to tell the desert what to do, but because the road has been leading toward a scatter of date palms, the kind that promise shade, water, and the sort of sweet, sticky fuel every traveler here has learned to worship. You feel the air change first. It's subtle, a cooling ripple that slides under your scarf and brings with it the scent of something green, something alive. The crunch of sand underfoot softens to a dusty hush, and then you hear it, a faint trickle, like a secret being told. Behind a curtain, a rider ahead lifts a hand and says, "Palm rest," in a tone halfway between relief and routine. When you step into the shadow of the first tree, the temperature drops the way it does when you walk into an air-conditioned shop from a summer street, except here. The AC is about 900 years old and runs on groundwater instead of electricity. The trunks are rough and grooved, the bark crisscrossed with the marks of old harvests, each notch a calendar no one bothered to write down. A woman in a faded indigo wrap is already at the water channel, rinsing dates in a shallow wicker tray. She glances at you. "First time here?" You nod. "Then eat before you sit," she says, as if that's the only law worth remembering. The dates are warm from the sun, their skins wrinkled and glossy. You bite into one, and the caramel sweetness fills your mouth in a way that makes you think, this must be what all those ancient poets were raving about when they used the word nectar. Somewhere behind you, a goat bleats with the persistence of a bad ringtone, but it only makes the moment more real. Under the palms, traders talk in clusters. A man with a copper water flask gestures wildly as he describes a sandstorm that ate a camel in one gulp. His friend just shrugs and says, "That's why I keep mine tied up." You sip cool water from a clay cup, the rim chipped in a way that fits your fingers perfectly. Someone mentions that caravans have been stopping here since before Mansa Musa's reign, the same ruler whose pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 flooded markets with gold and shifted entire economies. But here's the part you didn't know. There's an old story that during one of his journeys, a messenger was sent ahead to secure dates from this very grove for the Mansa's entourage. Pain's salt slabs so large they had to be carried by 2 men each. Historians still debate whether that's true or just a flattering tale told to make the place feel more important. You wander toward the edge of the grove where the sun spills through in golden shards. The air smells of date syrup and dust, a combination you didn't expect to like. Nearby, a boy climbs one of the palms with the kind of agility that makes you feel every joint in your own body just watching. He tosses down a bunch of fresh fruit and calls, "Watch your head." Though his timing is late enough that you suspect it's more a joke than a warning, you take a slow walk past the resting camels. Some are chewing lazily, eyes half closed, their jaws moving in that slow, hypnotic rhythm that feels like it could lull you into a nap. One has a saddle blanket embroidered with patterns of tiny red diamonds, faded to pink by the sun. The owner catches you looking and says, "My grandmother made it. Still keeps the heat off better than anything I've bought." The rest isn't just for the animals. Couriers are here too, one crouched over a scrap of parchment, writing with a reed pen dipped in dark ink that smells faintly of crushed berries. He notices you watching and says, "It dries faster if you hold your breath." You try it, and the ink does seem to settle quicker, though you can't tell if that's science or just suggestion. Someone starts cooking a flatbread on a small iron plate over coals, and the smell spirals upward, warm and yeasty. A merchant leans over to you and says, "Best bread in the empire." You raise an eyebrow. "Really? Even better than a souk?" He grins. "A souk doesn't have date syrup this fresh." Point taken. You let the conversation and the palm shades soak in until the sun starts to slant again, reminding everyone that even the sweetest oasis can't stop the day from moving on. Saddles are checked, water skins topped up, and someone hands you a small pouch of dates with a wink, for when the road forgets to be kind. As you step out of the grove, the heat presses close again, but the taste of that caramel fruit still lingers. Ahead, the pale stone from earlier has taken shape into something more deliberate: walls, perhaps, or the edge of a settlement built to last longer than shade or stories. The road under your feet feels firmer, as if it's been waiting for you. The pale stone walls grow larger with every step, their edges no longer a blur but something solid and deliberate. The air is thick with that hot, slightly metallic smell you get when sun bakes rock all day, and it makes the skin along your arms prickle. Heat wobbles in the air like bad television reception. But somewhere in that shimmer, you notice movement, colors, and shapes not belonging to your caravan. At first it's just a smudge of ochre and indigo. But then voices reach you, low, rhythmic calls, the kind traders use when coaxing camels into orderly lines. A bell clinks in an irregular beat, followed by the sharp shee of a whip slicing the air, not to hit, just to remind. The smell of spiced oil drifts past, and suddenly the desert feels less empty. A man in a wide-brimmed hat rides up from their line, squinting against the sun. His camel's fur is clipped into a neat spiral pattern, like someone had too much free time and a good pair of shears. "You coming from Ezuk?" he asks, his voice thick with dust and curiosity. "More or less," you say. "Palm rest just now." He grins. "Then you've had better dates than I'll see this month." His caravan is smaller, maybe 20 camels, but their packs are bulkier than yours, wooden chests bound with rope, clay jars sealed with wax, rolled hides the color of burnt coffee. He invites you to walk alongside while the two groups match pace. Close up, the new caravan feels like a traveling festival. A woman balances a woven tray of bright cloths on her head, each dyed so vividly it's like someone bottled the sunset. A boy leads a goat with one horn painted gold. The animal looks smug, the way people do when they've just bought shoes more expensive than yours. The traders swap news. You hear about a sandstorm that trapped an entire caravan for 3 days between two dunes like nature decided to give them a very boring prison sentence. Someone else talks about a shipment of copper from Takeda being rerouted after a bridge washed out in the rainy season. That triggers a small debate about whether bridges are worth the trouble out here. Only if they're still standing, one man says. Only if the river remembers to show up, another counters. You catch fragments of older history woven into their talk. One elder recalls hearing from his grandfather about the day news of the Battle of Kiruna traveled this very route. How riders brought word of Sundiata Keita's victory, sealing the birth of the Mali Empire. But here's a quirk. One of the women swears that along with the news, the messengers also carried a small carved lion figurine, meant as a symbolic token for allied towns. Historians still debate whether such an object existed, or if it was just as storytellers flourish. As the two caravans merge temporarily, you feel the road change. The packed sand here is littered with small polished stones, clicking under the camels' hooves. Heat bounces off them like a stovetop, and you're grateful for the way both caravans' shadows overlap, giving you a strip of accidental shade. Get drawn into a conversation with a man selling dried fish from the Niger River, their skin still silver in patches. He hands you a strip to taste. It's salty, chewy, and smoky, basically the desert's version of beef jerky. Lasts forever, he says, even if you don't want it to. You joke. He laughs, then shrugs. Especially then. Farther along, you pass a trio of musicians traveling with the newcomers. One plucks a gende, the notes dancing in the hot air like beads on a string. Another taps a drum shaped like an hourglass, the beat just slow enough to feel like walking music. The third, well, you're not sure what instrument it is, something with gourd shells and strings that hum faintly even when he's not playing. The sound makes the desert seem softer somehow, less like an expanse to be conquered and more like a friend telling you to keep going. You notice the smell of perfumed floral, sharp and out of place before you spot its source. A merchant with tiny glass vials strapped to his chest like ammunition. Try it, he says, holding one out. You hesitate. Is it camel safe? Only if the camel is looking to impress. He grins, and you take a cautious sniff. The scent is strong enough to make your eyes water, but it cuts right through. The dry air. The walls are much closer now, the pale stone broken by a dark gate. You can hear the faint murmur of voices beyond, mingled with the creak of carts and the distant clang of metal on metal. One of the traders leans toward you. Market day, he says. You picked the right time. You raise an eyebrow. Or it picked me. Someone calls for a halt so the two groups can sort their paths. You stand at the edge of the road, feeling the sun bite into the back of your neck, watching as packs are shifted and water shared. The boy with the gold-horned goat walks past again, the animal's bell tinkling in the heat. In that pause, you realize the encounters have been more than just a way to pass the miles. They're a reminder that the road isn't empty, even when it looks that way. Every traveler adds something. A story, a smell, even just a bit of color against the sand. You tuck that thought away as the gates ahead loom higher, promising the kind of bustle that makes even the biggest caravan feel small. And somewhere beyond those gates, the next part of your journey is already waiting, tapping its foot. The gates are only a dozen strides away when the air changes. It's subtle at first, a faint dryness that somehow feels drier than the rest of the desert. The sort of shift you might ignore if you didn't know better, like when the wind picks up on a summer afternoon and you think, oh, that's nice. Right before it blows your picnic into the neighbor's yard. You hear it before you see it. A low, distant murmur that could be the city's heartbeat, except it's coming from the wrong direction. The smell changes to less spice and baked stone, more like the dusty inside of an old book you forgot in the attic. Somewhere above, the light dips ever so slightly, not like a cloud passed overhead, but as if the sun just took a deep breath in. Sandstorm, a guard at the gate says flatly. He's leaning on a spear, not even pretending to rush. How bad, you ask? He squints toward the horizon. Bad enough you'll remember it. Not bad enough to talk about it for years. Unless you're a storyteller then. Terrible, catastrophic, maybe even historic. You glance back. The desert looks exactly the same, which is unsettling in the way horror movies are scarier before you see the monster. But then, just on the edge of sight, a beige haze thickens, moving like water under glass dot inside the gate. People are making choices. Some pull their stalls shut, wooden shutters clapping like quick applause. Others hurry to secure baskets and jars. A man with a cage full of pigeons is frantically covering it with cloth. The birds cooing in nervous waves. The temperature drops, which would be nice if it weren't accompanied by a dry wind that tickles your throat. It smells faintly metallic now like rain, except there's not a drop of moisture in it. You taste grit in the back of your teeth before you've even swallowed. You duck into the shelter of an open-sided warehouse where a handful of strangers have already gathered. The space smells of wool, leather, and faintly of cumin. And every sound is oddly crisp. The shuffle of boots on packed dirt. The faint tap of a camel's hoof outside. The whisper of fabric as someone rearranges their scarf. A boy about 10 years old stands near the edge, peering out. "It's not so big," he says. An older woman beside him shakes her head. "Neither is a bee, but you still don't stick it in your ear." The wind picks up in a steady climb, rattling loose boards. You catch flashes of movement outside, traders yanking awnings down. Guards pulling the gates tighter. A lone dog loping past with its tail tucked. Someone starts talking about the great sandstorm of 1362. The one that supposedly buried 3 outpost villages in a single afternoon and forced a caravan carrying salt from Taudeni to dump half its load just to keep moving. The dunes still hide those villages, the man insists. All their wells, all their grain jars frozen. In time under the sand. Or maybe they never existed, another voice cuts in. Historians still debate whether it happened at all. The storm smell deepens, dry, bitter, with that odd electric edge that makes your skin think it's about to rain. The light filtering into the warehouse shifts to a strange amber, like the world is inside a jar of honey outside. The first real gust slams through. Sand hisses along the walls and floor, a sound like 1,000 tiny fingernails scratching at wood. You pull your scarf higher over your mouth, but grains still sneak past, catching in your eyelashes. There's a man here who looks far too pleased about the whole thing, stroking his beard like he ordered this weather on purpose. "Best time to travel," he declares. A merchant laughs. "You have a strange definition of best," he shrugs. No bandits in a sandstorm. More people drift into the warehouse, shaking dust from their clothes. You hear snippets of conversation, someone complaining about lost figs, another grumbling that the storm will make the market prices climb by evening. A girl with henna on her hand starts humming under her breath, the melody so soft it's almost lost in the wind's whistle. The air gets thicker, the kind of thickness you feel more than see. Shadows blur, edges soften. You know that outside, the desert has vanished entirely, replaced by a boiling wall of sand that could strip paint off wood. The man with the pigeons peeks under their cloth cover and mutters to himself. Someone opens a water skin and takes a slow sip, offering it around like it's the last drink on Earth. Then dash just as suddenly as it came, the wind eases. Not stops, but loses its teeth. The sound lowers to a steady hiss. The light brightens a fraction. and the grit in the air thins enough that you can see the nearest wall without squinting. People start moving again. Cautiously, a woman with a cart of oranges pushes out into the street like she's daring the storm to come back. The guard at the gate reappears, brushing sand from his shoulders as if this happens every Tuesday. When you finally step outside, the air feels oddly clean despite the lingering dust. Ground is scattered with tiny drifts, shaped like waves frozen mid-crest. You can taste the storm on your lips, dry, mineral, and stubborn. The desert beyond the walls is unrecognizable now, its contours reshaped, its old tracks buried. Whatever lies ahead will be walking on a road no one has stepped on before. And in the quiet that follows the storm's breath, you have the strange sense that the land has just whispered something to you, but in a language you're not quite ready to understand. The streets after the sandstorm feel rinsed, though rinsed here means scrubbed with sandpaper, not water. The air is still sharp with that mineral tang, but now another layer threads through it. Smoke, faint and sweet, like palm fronds. Burned low and slow. You follow it, feet crunching over fine drifts of grit that weren't there an hour ago. The sound crisp in the hush that storms leave behind. Then you hear it, drums. Not the sharp parade kind or the awkward someone just got a bongo for Christmas kind, but deep, rounded pulses that seem to move through the walls themselves. They come in patterns, the sound thickening in your chest before your ears catch. Up, you glance at a man leaning against a carved lintel, his arms folded loosely. What's the occasion? You ask. He tilts his head, listening. Not an occasion, a telling. Of what? He smiles without teeth. Depends on who you are. The rhythm pulls you down a narrow street where sunlight slants in sheets through high clay walls, dust motes drifting like tiny planets. The temperature here is warmer than at the gate, the air stirred by people emerging from doorways and shaded courtyards. A woman balances a wide tray of fried millet cakes, their sesame scent carrying in little bursts when the breeze shifts. Somewhere, a goat sneezes with startling force. The drums get louder, joined by hand claps and something like rattles, a dry, shivering sound. You step into an open square and find the source. A half circle of musicians, each with a gem resting between their knees, their palms moving in blurs. It's not a performance in the tourist sense. No stage, no careful separation between player and listener. The front row is a line of children copying the beats with makeshift drums buckets, upside-down baskets, anything that rings. An old man with a scar over one eye stamps his foot in time, each stomp kicking up a puff of dust. Someone catches your sleeve, a boy about 12, grinning wide. You should dance, he says. I can't, you reply. He shrugs. Neither can most of them. You watch a woman in a red wrap spin with her arms high, her feet tracing a tight pattern in the dust. She laughs mid-turn, and it's the kind of laugh that's contagious even without knowing the joke. A man beside you leans in, voice pitched low over the drums. You know they beat these same rhythms before the Battle of Kirina, to send messages the enemy couldn't read. You recall hearing of that battle 1235, the founding of the Mali Empire under Sundiata Keita, when oral tradition says alliances were forged as much in song as in sword, closer to the musicians. One player dips his head and begins a new sequence, faster, like a heartbeat that just saw bad news. The others follow, and the mood shifts, not darker, exactly, but heavier. You feel it in your legs before you understand it in your mind. A woman at your side explains, that is the road rhythm. It says someone has gone far, maybe not coming back. She doesn't sound sad about it, more like she's just stating a weather fact. The rattling sound you heard earlier turns out to be from calabash shakers, their dried seeds clicking inside like a polite rain. The players move them with just enough force to keep the beat steady while the gems weave around it. You notice the smell of roasted peanuts drifting in from the far edge of the square, mix in with the fried millet scent. Someone walks past carrying a jug that releases a sharp tang fermented milk. If your nose is guessing right dot between songs, there's no applause, just chatter, laughter, and the occasional call to fetch someone from their doorway. One man is already telling a story to the group around him, voice rising and falling in time with the lingering echoes of the last beat. You hear. And when the lion appeared in the dunes, the caravan knew they'd taken the wrong road, because lions don't walk where the sand has no shade. Someone interrupts. That's not true. Historians still debate, the storyteller insists. Though from the grin on his face you suspect historians have nothing to do with this. The next rhythm starts slow, almost hesitant. It's joined by humming from the crowd, low and warm, until you feel like you're standing inside a giant heartbeat. The sound vibrates in the solace of your feet. Even the goat from earlier seems to have settled down to listen. You try to imagine this same square, centuries ago, no satellite dishes, peeking over rooftops, no faint buzz of a phone somewhere in a pocket, just the drums, the people, and the open sky. In your mind's eye, it doesn't look all that different from now. Someone offers you a millet cake from the tray. It's warm, crumbly, slightly sweet. You thank them, but the drums swallow your words. The sun slides lower, and the shadows of the drummers stretch like dark spokes across the square. The beats slow again, the spaces between them lengthening until they feel like held breaths. People begin to drift away, ducking back into side streets where lamps are just starting to glow with faint orange light. When the last beat lands, it's almost startling in its finality. The air seems to pause, holding onto the vibration a moment. Too long. Then the square exhales soft talk, shifting feet. A chicken flapping onto a low wall dot as you step back into the narrowing street. The residual pulse of the drums lingers in your chest, as if they've stitched some invisible thread into you. You have the sense that, like the storm earlier, the city has told you something, only this time you might understand it later. When the night air is cooler and the streets are thinner with people, somewhere ahead, past the last curve of the alley, a different sound rises, metal striking metal, sharp and bright. It rings once, twice, like a signal calling you to the next part of the night. The ringing grows sharper as you step out from the shadowed alley, each strike of metal like a pin driven into the evening air. The narrow street bends once, twice, and then spills you into a low, wide space where the light seems to collect before sliding off into open desert. A smith's yard sits at the far end, a furnace squatting like some glowing, half-awake animal. Sparks spit upward with every hammerfall, their brief arcs leaving ghost trails in your eyes. The heat rushes over you in breaths hot, then hotter until you realize the storm's cool mineral bite is now just a memory. You smell iron and coal, but also something faintly sweet-dried date pits burning with the charcoal, a trick smiths here use to temper the scent. Two men are bent over an anvil, working in tight rhythm. One turns the glowing piece, the other shapes it with quick, decisive taps. You stand just long enough for one to notice you. "You here for tools or trouble?" he asks without looking up. "Neither," you say. "Then wait until we finish." Neither takes less time. The edges of the city blur here literally. The buildings grow shorter, walls less formal, streets widening into dusty lanes that barely bother to pretend they're paved. Somewhere behind you, the faint echo of the drums is still there, like a low memory you're not ready to forget. But ahead, the horizon yawns open. Past the smithy, you find the first camel. It's chewing something with a look that could only be described as existential regret. Its handler, a wiry man with a sun-faded turban, catches you staring. "She spits," he says, "at people, at everything." This is the gathering edge of Wallata, a place that once sat on the seam between the Mali Empire and the long breath of the Sahara. You can feel the shift in atmosphere, not just physically, though the heat here lies heavier on your skin, but in the way people look at you, measuring whether you belong to the city or the road. A trio of traders lean against a stack of crates. The air around them thick with the smell of cardamom and goat hide. One crate is stenciled with a faded crescent. Another looks like it survived more journeys than its owner. A boy scurries past carrying a wooden tray of steaming tea glasses, each balanced with the kind of precision that suggests this is not his first sprint. The desert begins here, not in some dramatic cliff or dune, but in the way the ground stops, pretending to be domesticated. Sand pools in the corners of every step, and the light, even as the sun lowers, feels stripped of shade. You pass a group gathered under a wide acacia, listening to a man tell a story. His voice is dry but commanding, the way someone sounds when they've told this particular tale hundreds of times and still believe every word. And that is how, when the caravan reached Gaza, they found not gold, but walls built entirely of salt. Blocks so pure you could cut them for your cooking pot. He raises a hand, palm outward. Historians still debate whether it was truly walls or just the memory of them, but I tell you, I've seen the white stones myself. It's hard to ignore the low hum of movement. Hear wooden wheels creak under carts. Leather straps groan against shifting loads. A bird somewhere calls in sharp single notes. You catch the tang of dried fish from one corner, the heavier musk of pack animals from another. A woman selling water scoops it from a clay jar into a cup the color of old honey. She offers it for a few calories, and when you drink, it's warmer than your skin, carrying the faint taste of the jar itself. Somehow, it's still the best thing you've had all day. Beyond her stall, a tall man with a pale scar running from his temple to his jaw haggles with another over the price of dates. They were carried from the north, the seller insists. They taste like they fell off your own tree, the buyer counters. The seller grins. Then my tree is worth more than I thought. The closer you get to the actual gate, the more. The noise thins until it's mostly wind, camel steps, and the occasional metallic clink of gear being fastened. The gate isn't much, just two tall posts and a lintel of weathered timber, but it frames the expanse beyond like a painting. There's the road to Tichet, to Tagaza, to the salt mines and beyond. It's the same road Mansa Musa once took on his way to make the Hajj in 1324, with such a staggering display of gold that Cairo's economy reportedly hiccuped for years afterward. Hard to imagine that level of wealth passing through this modest choke point, but then, that's history for you. Big events squeezing through small spaces. A child runs past you carrying a bell. He rings it once, sharp and quick, then ducks into a side lane. You catch the bell's echo in the frame of the gate before it disappears into the open. You stand there a while, watching the light fade into that strange pre-night glow where colors flatten and the air cools just enough to breathe deeper. Somewhere behind you, the smith's hammer falls again, duller now. Somewhere ahead, the desert waits with the patience of something that's seen every traveler come and go. You take a step forward, and the ground shifts underfoot, not much, just enough to remind you that the sand here belongs to no one. Somewhere, far off, there's the faintest sound. Could be wind, could be something else waiting for you to decide if you'll follow it. The first thing you notice is the smell: papyrus, beeswax, and that faint, almost toasted note of ink left too close to a brazier. The sound comes next, a whispery scratch, like a tiny rake combing over fine sand. You follow it through a narrow, mud-plastered lane until you step into a courtyard where the air feels cooler, quieter, and entirely unlike the edge of desert bustle you just left. A row of scribes sit cross-legged at low desks, each bent over a sheet, their reed pens flicking, with the confidence of people who can fit an entire journey into 3 sentences. You get the sense they could write, "The camel died. Send more water," and make it sound like a royal decree. One of them glances up, eyes sharp behind a fan of curling script. "You need a letter?" "Not sure," you say. He shrugs. Everyone's sure after they can't send one. A boy brings a tray of small clay pots filled with different inks, some black as night, others a soft rust red. The air carries a tang of gum arabic, the binding agent that makes ink stick to paper instead of your fingers. A scribe dips, writes, blows gently, and in the pause, you hear a pigeon coo from a wicker cage in the corner. That's when you spot. Then the carriers. Sleek gray birds with iridescent necks, shuffling in their baskets like couriers impatient to clock out. You don't expect to see pigeons here, hundreds of miles from the nearest seacoast, but one of the older scribes catches your look. They know the way better than most travelers, he says. Faster too, and they don't argue over water prices. Historians still debate just how far these bird networks stretched. Some claim messages flew between Timbuktu, Walata, and even as far as Marrakesh, while others doubt they could survive certain legs of the trip. But you look at the pigeons now, eyes glittering in the dim courtyard light, and you can almost believe it. One scribe is working on something more elaborate than a trade note. Gold powder gleams faintly where his brush touches the parchment. You catch fragments of the design two lions flanking a stylized river. It's a royal seal, maybe for a court in Niani or Gao. There's a quiet urgency to the place, but it's not frantic. It's the steady pressure of knowing that word's here. Might take weeks to arrive, and once they do, there's no unsend button. Imagine emailing your boss and having to wait a month to regret it. A girl sits in the corner folding a letter into a long, thin strip. She threads it into a reed tube, then slides the tube into a pigeon's leg ring. The bird blinks twice, stretches its wings, and vanishes skyward in a burst of gray. Somewhere far away, that message will arrive faster than any caravan. You take a seat on a low bench, running your fingers over a scrap of parchment. It's rougher than paper you're used to, with tiny ridges where the fibers shift under your touch. You think about how many hands might have touched a single message scribe. Courier, guard, recipient, each leaving a smudge of their own story. One scribe leans toward you, voice low. Do you want your words to outlive you? That depends. You say, on what I write. He smiles faintly. Then choose the ink carefully. It's not just letters to merchants or kings that pass through here. You overhear someone dictating an apology to a distant cousin, another sending news of a child's birth, and a third requesting a shipment of salt blocks before the next rains, if the spirits permit. You think about the most famous journey. Tied to these routes, Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. A trip that wasn't just about faith, but also about flexing the Mali Empire's power. Some say letters went ahead of him, announcing his arrival, so cities could prepare for the wave of gold, gifts, and attendance. Others say the scale of his caravan meant no announcement was needed. The desert itself carried the news. From the corner, a pigeon flutters down onto the desk nearest you, tilting its head as if to inspect your face. He likes you, the scribe says. Does he bite? You ask. Only if you lie to him. Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, you hear the faint creak of cartwheels and the distant bark of a trader calling prices. But inside, time feels slowed to the pace of a penstroke. You watch one last message sealed with wax and pressed with a carved bone stamp. The seal smells faintly of resin and smoke when the scribe lifts it away. When you finally step back into the sun, it's lower than you expect, throwing the city walls in long, angled shadows. You still feel the weight of that question, do you? Want your words to outlive you? As the wind tugs lightly at your sleeves, like it's offering to carry your answer away. Somewhere, a pigeon takes off, wings cutting through the heat, vanishing in the direction you're headed next. The road out of Walata starts with the smell of baked dust. Yes, dust can have a smell, especially when the wind's been slow cooking it all day like a reluctant barbecue. The sun is lower now, a tilted bronze coin in the sky, and its light stretches everything you see into long shadows that seem to point forward, insisting there's somewhere else you should be. You hear it before you see it, the tinkling shuffle of camel bells, not in sync but close enough to make a kind of desert jazz. A caravan is forming up just outside the gates. Merchants calling last-minute deals over the clatter of wooden boxes being roped shut. One box makes a dull thud, and the man beside you leans in. "Salt," he says, as if it's treasure. And here it is. A gust of wind carries the scent of goat wool, cardamom, and something faintly metallic iron tools. Maybe, or the coins in someone's pouch. You squint against the orange glare and step toward the lead camel, who blinks slowly at you, looking less existentially regretful than the last one you met, but still not thrilled. The caravan leader, a tall man in a sun-bleached indigo robe, taps the map hanging from his belt. It's not the kind of map you'd frame, more like a diagram of memories and guesses. A few curves for rivers, jagged lines for ridges, dots for wells that may or may not still have water. 3 days to Arawane if the wind is kind, he says. And if it's not, you ask. He shrugs. Then you meet more sand than you planned. The air is cooling now, but not much. You can feel the warmth in the ground under your sandals, like the earth has been hoarding sunlight and isn't. Ready to give it up. Someone hands you a wrapped parcel flatbread, dried dates, and a small flask of water. You tuck it into your bag like a modern traveler stashing a granola bar before a flight, knowing full well it'll be gone halfway through. The caravan sets off with a creak of leather straps and the rhythmic hiss of feet in sand. The pace is slow, almost meditative, the kind that makes you aware of every shift in the wind. Somewhere ahead, a camel sneezes loud enough to startle the bird riding on the next merchant's shoulder. The merchant pats the bird's neck like you'd pat a pet that just embarrassed itself in public. By the second hour, the city has blurred into memory. The dunes rise and fall like the folds of an unmade bed, the kind you keep meaning to straighten, but never quite do. You hear the faint whistle of sand grains tapping against your sleeves, a sound too soft to be called a rattle, but steady enough to mark time. At night, the caravan stops in a shallow basin where the wind is gentler. The fire is small, wood is too precious to burn freely, but it's enough to send curls of smoke drifting into a sky so wide it could swallow every thought you have. You sit close, warming your hands, when someone begins telling the story of the great drought of 1303, when trade routes shifted like dice in a gambler's cup. According to him, whole towns vanished from the maps, swallowed not by war, but by the slow siege of no rain. Historians still debate whether that drought was truly empire-wide or just a cruel twist for certain routes. But listening now, you picture wells running dry one by one, caravans forced into new paths, and letters like the ones you saw in Wallata arriving too late to warn anyone. One trader unwraps a bundle and reveals a lump of salt the size of a brick. It glitters in the firelight like it's pretending to be a jewel. "You guard this better than gold," he says. "Gold can't stop your heart from stopping." You chew your flatbread slowly, its edges crisp from travel, but still holding a faint nutty sweetness. The air has cooled enough that you pull your scarf tighter, watching your breath puff into the night. The camels have knelt in a wide circle, some chewing lazily, others already asleep, their sides rising and falling like slow bellows. A young guide settles next to you, eyes reflecting the fire. "You're quiet," he says. "I'm listening," you reply. He nods. "Good. The desert remembers who listens." The next day, you rise before the sun, the horizon bleeding from deep indigo to pale gold. The sand underfoot is cold now, almost shocking after yesterday's heat. The caravan moves again, shadows stretching long ahead as if they're scouting for you. By midday, heat slams back into the world like someone opened the oven door. The camels' pace slows, their breath louder, and the air wavers in the distance, making it look like a silver river is just ahead. You know it's not, but the trick still works on your eyes. At the last stop, before Arawane, you meet a water seller whose voice is as cracked as his clay jars. He tells you about a year when the sands uncovered an old road paved stones from a kingdom. older than Mali itself, and how traders followed it for a season before it disappeared again. Nobody knows where it led, but some claim it went straight to a city built entirely of salt. You leave the seller behind with his story still echoing, the caravan pushing toward the faint smudge of the next town. The sun is low again, painting the dunes in copper and rose. You feel the pull of both the destination and the road itself, one promising arrival, the other promising that the journey isn't over yet. Somewhere just beyond sight, the first lights of Arowane will be waiting, and with them, the next choice of where the path bends. You hear the river before you see it, low, steady, and sure of itself, like someone who's been here long before you and plans to stay long after. The Sahel light has shifted again. It's warmer now, richer, as if the air itself has been steeped in amber. After days of salt caravans, wind-blown dunes, and a diet that could politely be called minimalist, the first glimpse of green makes your eyes ache a little. The road narrows into something that feels less like a trade route and more like a welcome mat, the one woven from dust and grass instead of anything you'd put in front of your apartment door. The scent changes to river water mixed with wet earth, wood smoke curling from unseen hearths, and the faint tang of fermented millet beer drifting from somewhere ahead. You inhale deeply. Congratulations, you've officially upgraded from desert air to things actually grow here, air dot at the edge of the city. The first thing you notice is sound. Niani hums not the frantic clamor of a port, but a layered, deliberate rhythm, the thump of pestles in mortar, the clink of metalworkers testing a blade's edge, the rise and fall of traders haggling in a half-dozen languages. Somewhere, a griot is plucking a kora, the notes skipping like stones over water. You catch yourself slowing down just to listen. First time in Niani? A man asks, his robe the deep blue of indigo that's been worn smooth with age. You nod, then look down as much as you look up. The stories here are in the ground, not just the sky. He's not wrong. The streets are worn into shallow grooves by centuries of footsteps, and each crossing feels like a pause in some very long conversation you've just walked into. There's history in the walls, too. Sun-baked bricks that have seen more seasons than your entire family tree. Somewhere in these streets, Mansa Musa once returned from his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, bringing so much gold that parts of the Mediterranean economy had a mild panic attack. People here still tell the story, though sometimes with the casual air of someone explaining why their uncle drives a very large, very gold cart. You pass stalls selling slabs of smoked fish, heaps of she-nuts, strings of amber beads that catch the sunlight like drops of frozen honey. The air is warmer here, but softer heat that hugs instead of interrogates you. The smells mix and shift with every step. Roasted groundnuts, damp leather, sweet baobab fruit, a whiff of river mud when the wind turns. A boy runs past carrying a bundle of reeds taller than himself, nearly colliding with a woman balancing a tray of steaming couscous on her head. She doesn't break stride. The couscous doesn't even wobble. Olympic-level balance. Careful. Someone calls after him. I'm careful. He shouts back, nearly tripping over a goat. Near the market center, you find the great meeting ground, a broad, packed earth square where news is traded as fast as goods. A messenger is reading a royal decree aloud, his voice carrying over the crowd. You catch only pieces, something about tax changes, something about repairs to the Eastern Well. Around you, people nod, murmur, or roll their eyes. Bureaucracy, it seems, is timeless. You wander toward the riverbank, where boats carved from single tree trunks slide up to unload. Piles of calabashes, sacks of grain, and folded textiles change hands in a practiced choreography. A boatman with arms like braided rope offers you passage upstream for the price of 2 measures of good salt, or 1 story worth telling. You tell him you're fresh out of both, and he laughs. Then you walk. Walking remembers more than riding. By midday, the heat leans heavy again, and you find shade under a neem tree near the palace walls. The palace itself is more fortress than ornament-thick walls, cool shadows, courtyards where guards move with the steady calm of people who know exactly where everything is. Inside, you catch a glimpse of carved wooden doors, polished by countless hands, and the faint scent of frankincense lingering in the air. One of the guards tells you a lesser-known fact. Years ago, the king commissioned a chamber lined entirely with locally woven cloth, not for display, but for acoustics, so advisors could speak without their words echoing into other rooms. Historians still debate whether it was for privacy or just because he liked the sound of his own voice. The guard says with a grin as the afternoon stretches, you follow the sounds of the kora back toward the market. The griot is still there, this time singing a lineage so long you're certain he started before you arrived. People gather in loose circles, some listening, others weaving baskets, children chasing each other in and out of the crowd. It's not staged, it's life, moving at its own pace. And you realize something. The road here wasn't just to Niani. It was to this braid of sound, scent, and movement that feels both fleeting and permanent. You stand still for a moment, letting the hum of it settle into you, until someone tugs your sleeve. You're blocking the path, a woman says, balancing a tray of mangoes. Sorry, you reply, stepping aside. She nods. Just keep moving. Niani likes people who keep moving. You do. And as the day tips toward evening, the river catches the last light, turning gold in a way that would make Mansa Musa himself nod in approval. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, another gathering is starting, one you've been told is worth seeing if you can find your way in. Evening slides into Niani with a kind of careful ceremony, as if the sun itself has been told to walk, not run. You feel the temperature ease, still warm, but now with a whisper of cool riding in from the river. Lanterns begin to bloom in the doorways, their light gold and flickering, smudging the edges of shadows. The streets smell different at night. Grilled fish sizzling on flat stones, the sharper tang of tamarind paste, and somewhere close, the earthy scent of wet clay cooling after the heat of the day. You're following the palace wall when a figure steps from a recessed doorway, tall, wrapped in a robe that catches the lantern light like water on silk. He doesn't introduce himself, just tilts his head toward a narrow side street. You carry something, yes? He says in a low voice. You nod, instinctively checking the small sealed packet tucked into the fold of your sash. It's light barely. Heavier than a letter, but you've been told more than once it's worth more than a camel train. The alley smells faintly of charcoal and laundry soap, and you're half aware of a cat pacing you along the rooftops. When you emerge into a quieter courtyard, there's a roundhouse with a carved lintel and an older man seated in the doorway. His eyes are quick, but his voice is slow. You've brought it? You kneel, placing the packet on a woven mat. The seal is pressed clay, marked with the crescent and sun emblem of the royal courier system. This is no ordinary message drop. It's part of the same communication network that once relayed news across the Mali Empire in days rather than weeks. Known for speed and discretion, these messengers were said to change horses so often that one could carry a message from Niani to Timbuktu before a single wax candle burned down. Historians still debate whether that's literal truth or a poetic boast, but the reputation stuck. The older man lifts the packet, weighs it in his palm. He breaks the seal, scanning the contents quickly before folding the parchment back into its wrap. His only comment, it arrives in time. Then, as if remembering you, he asks, do you want to see where it goes next? You do. He leads you to a small chamber at the back of the house, where 3 young riders are preparing for departure. Saddlebags are stuffed with small parcels, each wrapped in the same waxed cloth. The air smells of oiled leather and fresh hay. One rider adjusts his turban, the fabric still warm from the dye vat. while another tests a stirrup buckle with the focus of someone who knows that one loose strap could become the most memorable moment of his week for all the wrong reasons. North first, the old man says, pointing at a rolled map on the wall. Then east. His finger traces a route you've only heard described in stories, from Niani to Kengaba, then skirting the upper Niger before branching toward the Sahel edge. This message, he adds, decides whether three cities trade with each other next season or turn their backs. It's strange, standing in a dim room lit by a single oil lamp, realizing that the paper you carried under your sash all day might shape the movement of gold, salt, and grain for months. You imagine the desert routes, the river crossings, the market squares all shifting slightly in rhythm because of whatever's written there. A young writer catches your eye. First time delivering? He asks. First time in Niani, you reply. He grins. Then you don't yet know how fast news can move when it's worth moving. The departure is quick. Hooves clatter against the packed earth, and in moments they're swallowed by the night. You stand with the old man in the doorway, listening to the sound fade. The lantern light makes the dust in the air look like slow-falling gold. He offers you a drink, a gourd of cool water laced with something floral and faintly sweet. You sip, feeling the day's dryness ease from your throat. From somewhere in the city comes a sudden swell of drums, steady and low, like a heartbeat you didn't notice until it got close. Go see, the old man says. Your road here isn't done. You make your way back toward the market quarter, guided by the drumbeat. The streets are thinner now, the stalls shuttered, but pockets of light spill from open courtyards. You pass a group of women weaving. By lamplight, their looms creaking softly, the threads shimmering in colors you couldn't name if you tried dot in one open square. The drums are joined by handclaps and voices. It's a dance circle, half celebration, half competition. You stand at the edge, watching feet blur in the dust, ankle bells shaking like coins in a jar. Someone pulls you forward, laughing at your obvious hesitation. You manage a few steps, probably looking like someone trying to learn a video game dance from memory and failing, but they cheer anyway. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and sweat, but the breeze carries coolness now. You stay until the drums slow and people drift back to their homes. On your walk back, the city feels different. The message is gone, the riders are on their way, and you're just another shadow moving along the palace wall. But you can't shake the thought that somewhere along the route, someone will open that packet and the ripple will start. And if you listen closely, maybe you'll hear it. You round the corner and see the river again, catching starlight this time instead of sun. Across the water, a faint glow marks some gathering far beyond the city. Whatever it is, it looks like it's waiting for you. The riverbank glow fades behind you, leaving only the cool slide of night air and the occasional flicker of a lantern swinging in someone's hand. The streets are quieter, now not empty, just gentler. Even the goats have decided whatever they were yelling about earlier can wait until morning. The city, for the first time since you arrived, seems to exhale. And you get to walk in that breath. You take a left where the street tilts down toward the water, guided more by the memory of sound than sight. Somewhere behind a courtyard wall, there's the slow, rhythmic clack of a loom. A woman's voice hums low and tuneless over it, like she's stitching the night together one thread at a time. The air smells of charcoal smoke and damp reeds, and if quiet had a temperature, it would be this, neither warm nor cool, just steady. You find your lodging without quite meaning to, as if the city lets you go only when it's ready. The building leans toward the street, the way someone leans into a story they don't want you to stop telling. Inside, the hall is lit by oil lamps whose flames bow with every draft. The sound of your sandals on the packed earth floor is almost rude, like clapping in the middle of a whispered conversation. Your host, a wiry man in a loose tunic the color of wet clay, meets you halfway to the stairs. Long day? He asks, eyebrows doing the polite work of not prying. You shrug. It had variety. He grins. Here, variety is just Tuesday. The smell of millet porridge drifts from somewhere deeper in the house. A clay cup of cool water appears in your hand before you can think to ask for it. You drink, and the faint mineral taste feels like it's resetting your whole mouth. Up in your room, you push open the shutters to let the night in. From here you can see the faint suggestion of the Niger in the moonlight, just a darker shadow moving through the dark. Somewhere beyond that, the glow you'd seen earlier still lingers, but fainter now, like it knows you're watching. You sit on the edge of the bed, the reed mat under your feet a little uneven, and let the sounds of the city's quieter hours find you. A donkey snorts in its sleep. A baby fusses, then settles. Two men pass in the alley below, one saying something about tomorrow's barges, the other just grunting like that's a conversation ender dot. It's hard not to think about. What's moving tonight that you can't see? News, goods, secrets, all of it flowing on roads, rivers, and trails you'll never walk. This is the Mali Empire at rest, but rest here doesn't mean stillness. Even now, somewhere far off, Mansa Musa's gold caravans are still the talk of markets he's never visited. You think about that famous pilgrimage to Mecca a few years back, the one where the emperor's generosity was so over the top it actually messed with the price of gold in Cairo for over a decade. Modern economies have market fluctuations. This was more like a polite earthquake. A moth blunders in through the open window, headbutts the lamp twice, then seems to decide life has enough problems without chasing fire. You feel a tiny breeze slide through the shutters, bringing with it the faint briny tang of the river and the sharper note of dried fish from a nearby stall. It's oddly comforting, like the city's way of tucking you in, from somewhere down. The hall, there's a knock on another guest's door, followed by a voice. They're looking for you in the morning. A pause, which they, the kind you should meet dressed. You smile into your cup of water. Not your problem, at least not yet. Your host brings a small lamp and sets it on the floor, explaining that it'll burn slower there. Light pools upward, catching the dust in lazy spirals. Sleep well, he says, and his voice makes it sound like less of a wish and more of a confident prediction. The mattress is stuffed with something springy kapok, maybe in gives just enough to make you forget you've been walking all day. Outside, the lull of the Empire's nighttime is almost theatrical. If someone had asked the court musicians to compose a soundtrack of rest, it might sound like this. You let your mind drift to the stranger who intercepted you earlier. What was it about that packet? How could a message tilt trade between cities? Historians still debate whether the Empire's dominance came more from its control of gold and salt or from its information network swift, invisible, and sometimes more decisive than armies. You imagine those riders you saw, already halfway to their destination, their horses' hooves striking out a Morse code of urgency across the savannah. The ceiling beams above you are polished smooth from decades, maybe, centuries of smoke rising to meet them. You trace one with your eyes until it disappears into shadow. Somewhere outside, the river shifts, and you hear the faint slap of water against a moored boat. Still awake? A voice whispers from the adjoining room. You answer back, just as quietly, "Yeah, you?" "Too much tea," they say, and you both laugh silently like kids at a sleepover who know they should be asleep. The night deepens. The lamplight warms the walls to a honey gold, and the air has that perfect edge where you don't know if you want a blanket or not. You think about all the towns within a day's ride of here, some bursting with trade, others so quiet, they're practically rumors. Somewhere, someone is telling a story about Niani, the same way you'll tell one when you leave, and they'll imagine it half right and half wrong. That's how cities travel. You shift under the thin cotton sheet, listening to the Empire breathe. It's not just the city. It's the caravan resting under a sky full of stars, the fisherman pulling in the last net, the guard leaning on his Spear at the southern gate. It's the hum of 1,000 lives slowing just enough to meet the dawn with energy. Your eyes grow heavy, but your mind keeps flicking to the glow across the river. Maybe it's just torches from a late-night dock, unloading grain. Maybe it's something else entirely. You can almost hear the faintest hint of drumming, so soft it could be your imagination. But it feels like an invitation. You'll have to answer tomorrow. The last thing you notice before sleep takes you is the smell: wood smoke, river air, and something floral you can't place. It's the kind of scent that might follow you into dreams. And as the city's quiet empire wraps itself around you, you understand, rest here isn't the absence of movement. It's the preparation for what comes next. End of script. Sweet dreams.